Worry doesn't knock on your door politely. It breaks in. It sneaks into your mind like a thief in the night. And before you even realize it, it's already taken something from you. You ever notice that? You wake up, and before you've had your first cup of coffee, your heart's already racing about a meeting that hasn't happened yet, a bill that hasn't come due yet, a conversation you're afraid to have. That's not normal pressure. That's worry. And worry steals. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't prevent anything. All it does is rob. Worry will drain your energy while pretending it's helping you prepare. It masquerades as responsibility. It disguises itself as caution, as planning, as being proactive. But the fruit of it isn't peace. It's paralysis. It makes you feel like you're doing something useful, but it's just mental spinning. It's exhausting effort with zero return. And here's the problem. Most of the time, we don't even recognize it's happening because worry feels normal when you've been living with it long enough. Some of us have normalized chaos. We've lived in panic mode for so long that we think peace is suspicious. If it's quiet in our mind, we assume something must be wrong. We think peace is the problem. But what if I told you the very thing you're calling preparation is actually fear in disguise? What if the thing you're calling being careful is really just you trying to do God's job? Worry will take your focus. It will pull your mind into 100 different places, and now you can't even be present. You can't enjoy your kids. You can't worship fully. You can't sleep through the night because your mind is busy fighting battles that haven't even happened yet and probably never will. It's like trying to fight shadows, swinging and sweating over things that aren't even real yet. That's what worry does. It keeps you reacting to imagined outcomes while real life is passing you by. And worst of all, worry convinces you that you're in control. That if you think hard enough, stress enough, overanalyze enough, maybe you'll come up with the perfect solution, the perfect response, the perfect outcome. But that's the lie. Because if worry really worked, you wouldn't still be anxious. If worry had answers, you'd be free by now. If worry could fix it, you wouldn't be stuck in this cycle. It's a thief. It doesn't just rob your peace, it robs your clarity. It clouds your judgment. It twists truth into fear. It turns what-ifs into worst-case scenarios. It makes your imagination a battleground instead of a blessing. You weren't created to carry that weight. You weren't designed to live in fear. There's a limit to what your hands can do. You can put in the work. You can make the call. You can show up, prepare, and give your best effort. But no matter how strong you are, no matter how detailed your plan is, there always comes a point where your reach runs out. That's where frustration begins. When you've done everything you can, and it still doesn't move, still doesn't change, still doesn't fix. And that's when we start reaching beyond our limits, trying to control what was never meant to be ours in the first place. We start trying to manipulate outcomes, fix people, force timelines. But what if the very thing that feels out of reach isn't out of order? What if it's under God's sovereignty? Because there's a difference between being out of reach and being out of control. It might be beyond you, but it's never beyond Him. Your hands are limited, but His rule isn't. God's sovereignty means that nothing surprises Him. Nothing escapes Him. Not the stuff you prayed about, and not the stuff you forgot to mention. Not the diagnosis, not the delay, not the detour. He saw it. He factored it in. He's not scrambling to adjust the plan. You're not living plan B. You're still right in the middle of His will. Even if it looks like chaos from your perspective. And let's be real. Sometimes it does look like chaos. Sometimes you're standing in a situation thinking, this can't be God. There's no way he's in this. But God's sovereignty isn't always loud. It's not always obvious. It often looks like silence, like stillness, like delay. That's why trust is hard, because we equate God's movement with our measurement. If it's working, God is in it. If it's not moving, I must be doing something wrong. But that's not how sovereignty works. Sovereignty means he's working when you can't see him. He's covering what you can't touch. He's going ahead of you and cleaning up behind you. He's in rooms you're not in. He's shaping hearts you can't reach. He's turning decisions in your favor without your permission or your presence. You don't have to micromanage miracles. You don't have to chase down what he's already appointed. You don't have to stand on your tiptoes trying to reach something he already called done. That situation you're losing sleep over. That outcome you're trying to calculate. That person you keep trying to fix, convince, or control. If your hands can't reach it, maybe it's because God doesn't want them to. Maybe it's not your job to reach. Maybe it's your job to release. Sovereignty is the safety net under your surrender. It's the assurance that even when you don't feel in control, you're still under care. And you can rest in that. Not because you understand it, but because he's still over it. There's something powerful about recognizing your limits, not as a sign of weakness, but as an invitation to lean into God's strength. You weren't designed to carry every burden on your own. The weight of the world isn't meant to rest on your shoulders. That pressure, that anxiety, that constant tension, it's not what you were made for. Sometimes we walk around like we're superheroes, thinking we have to hold everything together. We try to be the fixer of broken things, the solver of impossible problems, the one who makes sense of chaos. But that's not your assignment. That's never been your job. You were created to be strong, yes, but strong enough to know when to ask for help, strong enough to surrender the impossible, strong enough to say, God, this is yours. The Bible tells us that God's yoke is easy and his burden is light. But how can that be true if we're trying to carry what's too heavy for us? It can't. There's a reason Jesus told us to cast our cares on him, because he cares for us. That's not just a nice sentiment. It's a divine strategy. You were never meant to carry the things that only God can carry. Only he can handle the burdens that crush your spirit, the worries that steal your joy, the fears that paralyze your faith. Think about it. When the weight of a situation is crushing you, when the anxiety makes it hard to breathe, that's a clear sign that the load is too big. That's God's way of saying, you can't carry this alone. Let me. It's not a failure to surrender. It's a recognition of truth. The truth that your human strength has limits, but God's strength does not. Trying to carry what only God can handle leads to exhaustion, burnout, and brokenness. It fractures your peace and dims your light. You start to shrink under the pressure instead of standing tall in faith. But when you give that burden to God, you experience freedom. You trade your heavy load for his light one. There's incredible power in releasing control. When you stop trying to fix everything, stop trying to micromanage outcomes, stop carrying what's too big for you, you open space for God to move. You invite his peace into your storm. You make room for his power to be made perfect in your weakness. God doesn't call you to do his job. He calls you to trust him with the things you cannot fix. You weren't created to hold the weight of the future, the mistakes of the past, or the struggles of the present all on your own. That burden belongs to God. And here's something else to remember. Carrying that burden alone isolates you. It disconnects you from the very one who wants to carry it with you. God is not distant or indifferent. He is near, ready, willing, and able to take what's too heavy and replace it with peace that surpasses all understanding. So when you find yourself overwhelmed, when the anxiety starts creeping in, when the pressure feels unbearable, remember who you are. You are not a carrier of impossible burdens. You are a child of God, designed to lean on His strength, not your own. One of the hardest things to do, especially when life is messy and complicated, is to let go. To release your grip on something you care about deeply, something you've invested time, energy, and emotion into. Letting go feels like surrender, and surrender often feels like giving up. But here's the truth that changes everything. Letting go is not giving up. It's giving it to God. When you let go, you're not throwing in the towel. You're not quitting the fight. You're not saying, I don't care anymore. No, letting go is a courageous act of trust. It's saying, God, I can't carry this burden anymore. I can't control this outcome. I'm handing it over to you. It's an act of faith that recognizes God is bigger, stronger, and more capable than you ever imagined. Far too often, we equate letting go with weakness or failure. We think if we release control, it means we weren't strong enough or we didn't try hard enough. But the Bible shows us something different. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That rest comes when you stop carrying what wasn't meant for you to carry. Rest comes when you release your grip and hand your worries, fears, and struggles to God. Letting go means trusting God's timing when yours feels delayed. It means trusting His plan when yours feels uncertain. It means believing He is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. You're choosing to believe that His power is greater than your problem. This act of surrender is not passive. It's not sitting back and waiting for things to magically change. It's an active decision to release your anxieties and replace them with faith. You let go of the need to control, and you lean into God's control. You stop wrestling with the problem and start resting in His promises. When you hold on tight, you exhaust yourself. You carry weight meant to be carried by God alone. Letting go frees you from that exhausting, endless struggle. It frees your mind and heart to focus on what you can do, like praying, trusting, loving, and living faithfully in the moment God has given you. Letting go also opens the door to move in ways you couldn't imagine. When you stop trying to force an outcome, you make space for His perfect will to unfold. You allow God to surprise you with solutions, peace, and breakthroughs that only He can provide. It takes humility to let go. It takes courage to release what feels so precious. But remember, God is not distant or disinterested. He's right there, ready to take what you hand over. He's not waiting for you to be perfect before He acts. He's waiting for you to trust Him enough to give it all to Him. So when the fear of loss or the weight of uncertainty makes you want to clutch harder, remind yourself that letting go is not giving up. It's giving it to God, the one who holds your past, your present, and your future in His hands. You are not alone in this process. Countless people have stood where you stand, trembling at the idea of release, but finding freedom when they finally did. Letting go is the pathway from chaos to peace, from anxiety to assurance, from fear to faith. One of the most difficult things about life's challenges is that we often feel alone. When the storm rages, when the doors stay closed, when the answers don't come, it's easy to think that nothing is happening, that God has forgotten us, or that the situation is out of control. But the truth is exactly the opposite. God is already working behind the scenes. Even when you don't see it, even when you don't feel it, His hand is moving. Think about the stories in the Bible. So many times, God's work was invisible to the human eye at first. Joseph was sold into slavery, forgotten in prison. But God was orchestrating a path that would save nations. David was hiding in caves, waiting for his moment, but God was preparing a king. Esther found herself in the palace at just the right time, even though she didn't know why, because God was working behind the scenes to save her people. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't line up with ours. He's not late. He's never late. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening because God is setting the stage, lining up resources, softening hearts, opening doors, and closing others, all while you're waiting. What you see is a moment. What God sees is eternity. When you feel stuck, God's behind the scenes, is moving pieces you can't even begin to understand. He's working in ways that don't make sense to your logic, but are perfect for His plan. You may not see the progress, but that doesn't mean He's not moving. It means His ways are higher than your ways, and His plans are greater than your plans. This unseen work of God is a reminder that you don't have to control everything. You don't have to have every answer. You don't have to carry the burden of trying to force the outcome. You can trust the one who sees the whole picture and is actively working in your favor. God's work behind the scenes also means that setbacks are not failures. They're often necessary parts of a bigger process. What looks like a delay or a closed door might be God protecting you or preparing you for something greater. It's a pause, not a stop. That's why faith is so important. Faith is believing in what you can't see. Faith is trusting that God's invisible hand is still moving, even when everything looks quiet or stuck. When your circumstances seem to shout, impossible. Faith whispers, God is working. This unseen work should bring comfort, peace, and hope. When you remember that God is active behind the scenes, it changes how you live in the waiting. It changes your perspective on problems. It shifts your focus from panic to patience, from frustration to faith. You may not understand the timing or the process, but you can rest in the assurance that God has not forgotten you. He is not indifferent to your pain or your prayers. He is working, always working, even when you don't see it with your eyes or feel it in your heart. So, while you wait, while you pray, while you hope, remember that God's hand is moving behind the scenes, orchestrating your breakthrough, setting your steps, and turning your story around in ways only He can. In life's uncertainties, worry only steals your peace without changing the outcome. Remember, God's sovereignty covers what your hands cannot reach, and you were never designed to carry burdens meant for Him alone. Letting go isn't giving up. It's entrusting your struggles to a God who is already working behind the scenes. When you release control and place your faith in Him, you step into a peace that surpasses understanding. So stop worrying. Trust God with the uncontrollable. Rest in His timing, His power, and His unfailing love, because He is holding your future securely in His hands.